What is fear? Why does it exist? How can you overcome it? The opposite of love is not hate, but fear. To become love is to become fearless. Your purpose is to evolve, to awaken to your greatness. Tom Campbell, The Physics of Fear.
Today I'm joined by Tom Campbell. He's a NASA physicist, or he was, or he works on one-time contractual freelance basis. I'm not exactly sure. He's the author of the book My Big Toe. TOE stands for Theory of Everything. And you guys may be familiar with him. I've done a few videos in the past featuring his work. We also interviewed once before. Got a lot of exposure. People seem to really like what he has to say. I obviously enjoy what he has to say. And really at the core, I think one of the most important things he talks about is the purpose of our lives here. We go through life. We have a very here in the West, we have a very mechanistic view of reality, that we're kind of just lumbering robots, mechanistic, purposeless beings, kind of going along in this clockwork of reality, nothing more than physical matter in a purposeless existence. That seems to be like the very common Western general view of reality. I think that has a lot of shortcomings and even internal contradictions, but I'm not sure if we'll get into that now. I think it's very important for people to understand purpose, to understand meaning. And I know a lot of you who watch my content are, aware of this idea. This idea that there's more to you than just physical bits of matter kind of worrying about in reality, that there's a deeper level to things. And one of the great things about Tom's work, a lot of the stuff that I talk about here in Red Pill Philosophy, awaken to your greatness, it's about pushing the limits of your comfort zone to see how that improves you as a person. And that ties in really, really well to what Tom talks about, because one of the fascinating things about Tom's, theory of everything is that, where in the past, in very Newtonian worldviews, a theory of everything would most likely, if not 100% for sure, a theory of everything would only consider mechanistic things. It wouldn't consider purpose. It wouldn't consider internal subjective qualities like imagination, preferences, tastes, things that can't be quantified, or at least we haven't been able to quantify yet. And I think that if we're going to have a true theory of everything, one that truly is all-encompassing, and one that doesn't just consider the objective but also considers the subjective, it seems like that's what mainstream materialist science has done. It's cut off the subjective and said that's not valid, that can't be a measurement of truth, and it's emphasized entirely the objective as the standard of truth. And I think that cuts off a big part of reality. I mean, the subjective, without consciousness, one could argue that the objective world wouldn't exist. I mean, if there are no conscious beings to experience the objective world, what does the objective world even matter to begin with? So I always found it fascinating, and I don't want to ramble on too long, but I want to give a proper premise for this interview. It seems like in this reality, if we're going to have a more consistent and thorough view, we have to also consider the subjective. And if you also want to improve yourself, self-help, pushing your comfort zones, achieving goals in life, it certainly helps to understand why you're doing it, and even more importantly, the dynamics of the internal things that are holding you back. First and foremost, primarily, would be fear. Fear is a huge inhibitor to most people. In fact, I would say probably 90% maybe of all the things holding people back, holding you guys back from achieving your goals, is probably most comes down to fear. A fear of something internal that is holding you back. You're afraid to talk to that pretty girl you met the other day at the grocery store. You're afraid to, confront your boss and say, I deserve, a raise. You're afraid to, go to the acting, audition because you have a fear of expressing yourself. Because fear seems to be the main thing holding people back. And what if we could have not just woo-woo like cliched self-help ideas and approaches dealing with fear, but what if we could have a physics approach? What if we could have a guy, a NASA physicist, who has a very technical grasp on a lot of the fundamental natures of reality, especially when you're talking about like quantum physics and things like that. How can that be used to understand fear, to understand these internal dynamics, and then more effectively, deal with them as you go about your life, pursuing your ambitions, pursuing your goals, and confronting challenges along the way. So, to define fear, if it can even be defined, what is fear?
Okay, well, let's start with, sometimes you can define things in terms of the opposites, right? What is hot? It's the opposite of cold, this sort of thing. Well, fear is the opposite of love. Love is caring about other, not focused on yourself, and fear is focused on yourself. It's all about you, what you need, what you want.
Would that relate by any chance, not to cut you off, but would that relate by any chance to like social insecurities? Because I think a lot of people who are socially insecure, people who suffer from like social anxiety or shyness, in many ways I think that they're just hyper focused on themselves in a way. They're too worried about what others might think about them. Does that relate in any way?
One way to find a fear is the ego. Now, ego is a derivative of fear. You have ego because you have fear. If you had no fears, then you wouldn't have ego. You see, ego is a mechanism you use to deal with the fear. So if you're afraid of social things, then your ego will say, well, I really don't care anyway. I don't want to go to that party, I don't want to apply for that job, I really don't want to do that anyhow. And then if you do it, if you do apply and you get turned down, it's well, those people are stupid,
Yeah.
So you have all this ego that tends to make the fear not so fearful. That's what ego's job is. So the reason you have ego is because you have fear. Now, ego is easy to find. You can find your ego just by examining all of the choices, all of the things you do. And by choices, I mean you choose how you feel. Your feelings are choices of yours. If somebody says something that annoys you, the fact that you get annoyed, that's your reaction to it. You choose that. Okay, so maybe we're thinking about choice in a little different way that most people are thinking about it, but you choose to be agitated, you choose to be angry. That's not the only reaction you could have.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to be upset about that, but because of the way you are, you choose to be upset because you are fearful. You have ego. So in any day or any moment, if you look at your life, your feelings, look at your emotions, how do you feel? Do you feel anxiety? Do you feel upset? Do you feel any of the things that we would call negative or dysfunctional kinds of feelings? You can feel annoyed, or you can feel you might just feel frightened directly. But basically anything that isn't a joyous, happy, very positive emotion, that is ego attached to a fear. Because once you get rid of that fear and the ego goes away, your life is very positive and very happy and full of joy. And if it isn't, it's because you have this fear-ego combination. And it's another one of the things that drag you down because it limits you. In any case, so that's how you can tell. So these people that would say, well, I really don't have any fear. Well, do you ever have a moment of anxiety? Do you ever get annoyed? Do you ever get angry? Does anything ever upset you? Is your life full of joy and peace and, just terrific and positive all the time? Well, almost everybody would say no. Nobody's life's like that. Everybody's upset and worried and concerned and annoyed, and well, most everybody is full of fear and ego.
And
that's
so,
kind of the normal state of affairs for people.
Right, right. Okay. Now, by the way, I did a video not too long ago. I always tell this to people that I interview. I did a video not too long ago about awkward silences. I think sometimes being silent during a conversation is normal. So if I go silent for like 30 seconds, it's totally normal. I'm kind of registering the information. So it seems a lot easier to confront fears when you take a step back and you kind of look at it from this more objective perspective. Like, have you ever heard any of your peers tell you that, you know, viewing fear and their purpose in life from the perspective you put forth helps them overcome fears more easily? Have you ever heard anyone say that before?
Yeah, I think it puts it in a context that you can deal with it. Otherwise, you just, well, okay, I'm me and I have this fear, you know, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
You know, what's the point? Where am I? Where am I going? Which way's up?
And the feeling of fear,
that sort of stuff.
The feeling of fear itself is so suffocating that it can just cripple people from moving forward. So that's one of the things I always liked about your premise, is that it really, like, it gives fear a context. So, fear, yeah, it can be really suffocating. It could really be overshadowing and overpowering when you're in the moment where you have to face it. But at the same time, being able to take a step back and to look at it and see a grander purpose, to see a reward, a cosmic reward, so to speak, that you get as a result of facing fear, which is you evolve towards love. Which, I mean, you know, there's a lot of misinterpretations of the word love. I think when you use the word love, well, I guess when you use the word love, you mean fearlessness at the same time, right? Isn't they?
Sure.
They kind of work together. So, and I view
absolutely one opposite of the other. So if you get rid of all the fear, then what's left is love.
Yeah.
You know, those are two opposite things.
One of the interesting things that came to mind earlier when you were talking about your analogy of different societies, one society based on fear and one based on love, and how they would each interact. And how the one based on fear, they're going to try to control. They're going to try to control resources. They're going to try to control outcomes. The impulse to control was something that came to mind. And I think that is huge. Just in many examples. Let's just talk about somebody who has trouble with shyness, for example, or social anxiety. At the end of the day, in many ways, that is so much an impulse to want to control other people's opinions of you. It's about wanting to control people's reactions. You're not okay with just being who you are, letting it hang out, and whatever happens, happens. You want to control what people think about you. And that rigidity, that desperate scramble to control, it reflects fear so much. And a lot of times, our modern society misinterprets very controlling people. A lot of times it paints controlling people like, you know, very tyrannical people. Society paints them as like being courageous, which is funny because you would say that those who try to control the most, those who are scrambling competitively to control outcomes and to make sure everything is just the way they want it, in many ways they're actually the most fearful.
Sure, and you know, that's a good description of most of us. Most everybody is like that. We go through, you know, life is a very simple process. Stuff happens and we get to deal with it. That's life. Now how you deal with it is what's important, not the stuff that happens.
Yeah.
See, the stuff isn't all that important. What's important is how do you deal with it. But we all focus on the stuff that happens. We manipulate it. We want it to happen the way we want it. So we manipulate almost everybody and everything in our life, and the average person probably puts 95, 98% of all time into manipulating, you know, what happens.
Right.
They put very, very little thought into why and how, you know, they're going to deal with it.
Well, you know, that impulse.
It's all about manipulation.
You know what, Tom? That impulse to control, where people care more about controlling the outcome as opposed to caring more about their reaction, it seems like that desire to control very much reflects a mechanistic worldview that people have, where because we think the external, objective, material world of matter matters more than the internal, subjective world of how we react to things, it's almost like there's a connection there between this kind of mechanistic worldview where we have to control, where we have to accumulate, wealth, we have to accumulate, a bigger house to improve the way we view ourselves and feel, as opposed to caring more about the subjective, the internal world of consciousness and the way you react to things, which plays a bigger role in the evolving of your consciousness, which, according to your premise, your theory, that is the primary purpose of our existence.
Right. That's also the primary of our happiness and of our, of our joy and of our peace. All that from lowering your entropy, not from controlling things. Even the people who are very successful at controlling things, and they end up very wealthy, or they have, everybody in their family obeys them, without question, or whatever else. They control most everything in their life. Well, we would call them very powerful. But if you look at such people, you find that they're generally not all that happy, not all that full of joy and peace. Their life is a constant battle, it's a constant struggle, because there's always something going on else that they have to control, and life becomes like trying to put too many clothes in a suitcase. You open it a little bit to stuff something else in, and something pops out.
Exactly.
It just gets to be impossible to do. So yes, you can be successful at control, but that makes you not necessarily successful at evolving the quality of your consciousness or being a human being. So those two things don't have to be an opposite. You could have a lot of stuff and still be full of love. It's not like the only people who are love-based and not people are hermits that live in caves by themselves. That's not it at all. There's not a exclusiveness between those two things, but basically they travel together most of the time. If you're very controlling, you want to manipulate. So when I say manipulate things, some people will say, well, they don't manipulate, but if they look closely, they manipulate almost everything. They do things based on how they think that'll turn out, and how it will turn out is basically how it'll turn out for them, whether they think that's the right way that it should turn out from their viewpoint. So if we are very manipulative, very controlling, and we are afraid not to be, people will tell you that their fear is that if I don't control it, if I don't manipulate it, then it'll all go to hell in the handbasket. It'll be terrible, if I don't try to continually manipulate my boss to see it my way, then I won't, get as good a rating. If I can't manipulate my friends, if I can't manipulate my spouse, if I can't, control my children and their behavior and who their friends are and whether they, do this or do that, if I can't control these, then everything will go to hell in a handbasket. It'll all disintegrate. The only reason my life is even no more painful than it is because I am able to control it enough to keep it at this certain level of it's okay, but it never really gets good or joyful. It's always kind of okay. That's as much as I can control it. Well, that's a big fallacy. The reason that your life is not full of joy and happiness is because you're trying to control everything, not because you're not good enough at controlling everything. The idea that people think that if I could just control everything, if I were the master of the universe, the universe would be a happy place. That's not true. If you were the master of the universe would be a hard place. That's the point. You don't get happiness by better control.
It's kind of strangely paradoxical in a way, because in one sense people think, oh, if I can just, a lot of times a lot of people, they want to try to control everything. Well, I lost it. I had an idea and I just crumbled and faded away, so forget it.
Maybe it's time for one of those pregnant pauses.
Yeah, right. So okay, here's one of the things I did want to say though. On this whole idea of people trying to control, we live in a world full of people trying to control. Almost, it seems like most people are trying to control, and that, of course, feeds into their own misery. And then, you've got people like Bruce Lee who used to say, you got to flow, and the power of adaptability. That's a kind of an unrecognized, unacknowledged trait in navigating life. Here in the West especially, we want to plan everything in advance 20 years. We want to put kids in school so they can get a diploma, so they can get a degree. 20 years down the road, you get a job in something they hope is still relevant after they studied 4 years in college for it. People want to have their retirement plans set up their entire life. Like, we live in a society constantly trying to pre-plan and control for like 60 years down the road, which is what retirement is as well. This pie in the sky that we're all preparing for. And we seem to ignore the power of adaptability. I was in Chile about half a year ago, and I met a guy who, he says he doesn't really plan for anything. He literally kind of just goes through life adapting to the moment as situations occur. And I thought to myself, there's a lot of power in that. I mean, there's a lot. It takes a lot of I don't know what the word is. It maybe fearlessness in many ways to be able to live life without planning, without controlling, and instead adapting to the moment as new spontaneous situations arise. It's kind of like, what is the more powerful approach to live? Is it controlling out of fear, or is it adapting to the moment and placing how you react to things as a priority and then going through life in that way?
Well, there's things to mention here. One is that there's nothing wrong with planning. Planning and looking ahead is okay, but planning in support of fear is a problem.
Yes.
Planning in support of caring and love and cooperation pays dividends. So it depends on your intent, what you're planning for, and how you're planning. So there's nothing really wrong with looking ahead and planning. It's just why you're planning. What are you looking ahead for? If you're trying to manipulate, if it's a fearful motivation, a fearful intent behind it, then it just creates more trouble. Well, of course, that's the way it is for most of us. The other thing is, your second question, is that once you stop trying to control your environment, your life, and the people you interact with, this very strange thing happens. And this person you were talking to probably told you this, and that is, everything you need, everything that's important, everything that's significant to you falls at your feet just when you need it and want it significant. In other words, you don't have to control and force the environment and the people in that environment to give you what you need at the moment, what's significant for you. It all comes to you without it. So it's an interesting, you say it's counterintuitive. Yes, it's counterintuitive. When you finally give up trying to control, you find out that you don't need any control. Everything that you would wish, falls in your hand, falls in your pocket just about the time you need it. The reason for that is that when you give up trying to control, you see that the point of things isn't how much can you get, how much money can I have, how much fame can I gather, how many people, like, not those kinds of things are not the point. It's what can I give? How can I help? So when you look at life in a very positive way, then everything is good. Something comes along that's difficult. Oh, well, that's great. There's a lesson here. There's an advantage. Things I can learn from that situation. I'll meet it with love. I'll meet it with caring, even though it's a hard situation. Everything's an opportunity. So when you look at life and interpret it as a very positive thing, life is an opportunity. See, it's not what happens, it's what we do with it. So you don't really care a whole lot about what happens. And the odd thing is that what happens turns out to be just really wonderful. Everything that good is what happens. As long as you try to force it to be your way, it never is very good for very long, because even if you do force it in a way and you kind of sit back and say, okay, I got it just the way I want it, it won't last that way. Before long, you will be unhappy and frustrated and upset again, because it won't last. So your friend is right. It's more powerful to live in the moment, to care, and it's about other, and just let the rest of the world happens. And however it happens, that's good. Because
the guy was
what
totally
happens
happy.
isn't important. It's how you deal with it that's important. So whatever happens is just another opportunity to grow up.
The guy was totally content. He had friends. He did things. He was also a very helpful guy. Like, he was also like very charitable to people. Like, he would always try to, like, buy you something. Like, he's not a guy that had a lot of money, but again, it was a strange thing where he's a guy, he didn't have a lot of money because he didn't work in any official job. He literally, like, traveled the world just kind of going along and, doing people's favors to get the cash to pay for the plane ticket or things like this. And then paradoxically, he was still very charitable, because he was like, he's like, oh, I believe, I think he said he doesn't believe in money, but, that's a different conversation. But he's like, I believe in helping people. I believe in helping people out, and that if people kind of, if people were more willing to help others, the economic fluidity of favors between people would kind of be lubricated. And then, because we kind of live in a society that if you don't have the green pieces of paper, for the most part, you can't do anything in society. You can't buy this, or you can't go here, you can't go there. Whereas his view was kind of...
Because it sounds like he has shown that a falsehood. He goes all over the place, and he doesn't have piles of paper, but you can't do anything if you don't have money. Well, he sounds like he does everything.
Exactly.
And he doesn't have any money. Well, how does that happen?
Exactly. And money itself, and again, it kind of goes back to your point that not all forms of planning are bad. Bad's probably not the right word. Not all forms of planning are a form of or reflection of fear, but money in many ways, a lot of time money is something people cling on to as well. They try to cling on to the money because the money is going to give them a social status boost, or the money is going to give them, the sense of security in a society where everyone's competing to have zeros in their bank account. But one of the really important things that I wanted to mention was, I was watching a video of you talking about fear. I don't know when the video was uploaded, probably a while ago, and you said that the key, or one great way to eliminate fear, and this is something I really want my viewers to listen to, is to accept the worst. And of course, that definitely ties into what we were just saying a minute ago about it's how you react to things. It's not what other people do or react to you. It's more about how you react to your choices in the aftermath. Accept the worst. And basically, what you said in the video was, if you want to overcome fear, simply accept the worst that happens. So let's say a guy wants to go talk to a girl at the grocery store. He's at the grocery store in the produce section, looking through the vegetables or whatever, and he sees a pretty girl. He wants to go talk to her or whatever. In accepting that could happen, let's say she doesn't like you and she slaps you in the face, really crazy stuff like that. In accepting the worst, though, something kind of does happen, or should happen, where because you are no longer worried about what might happen, the fear can have no control over you. Could you explain that dynamic between fear and accepting the worst?
You see, the fear is a fear that some sort of thing will happen. Okay, I fear that people won't like me. I fear that I'm inadequate. Okay, those are typical fears. If you accept it, and by accepting it, I mean you're saying, okay, people won't like me. Okay, this girl will say, hey, buzz off, chump. Why would I be interested in you? Okay, accept that and say, well, and when I accept it, that doesn't mean that you say, all right, that might happen. What that means is you say, if that happens, it's okay. If that happens, I can, I can deal with that. That's just the way she feels about things. Maybe she's really not a very nice person. Maybe this or that. And if she's not a nice person, then I really don't want to get, too close to her anyway, because that'd just be a lot of trouble. So I accept it. Whatever it is she said, however she reacts to it, that's okay. I'm not going to be upset by it. I'm not going to walk away feeling bad or feeling like, oh, boy, I was a jerk. I made a fool of myself, whatever. It just is what it is. And that's what it is. And if you can accept that, truly accept it, and not just trying to trick yourself into thinking you accept it, then the fear no longer has any teeth. It doesn't matter what she says. It's all okay. If she smiles at you and a relationship starts up, good. If she doesn't, if she says, I'm in a hurry, move over, you're standing in front of the vegetable there that I want, then get out of her way and let her go. She's busy. She's doing something else. So you just have to accept it as it goes. There's no pain in that. You've basically taken the fear and pulled all of its teeth out. It can't bite anymore because you're okay with the worst that could happen. All right, you're worried, you're going to go someplace and you're going to be bored and you're going to be this and that and you're quiet and you're a wallflower and you don't want to talk to anybody. Worst that could happen. Well, the worst that could happen is probably what will happen if you're fearful.
Yeah.
Because you'll create all that stuff happening. Because of your fear, you'll go there, you'll stand against the wall, nobody will talk to you, it'll be just like that. It's the fear creates that.
Yeah.
So if you can say, okay, I'll accept that, me very much. They won't want to talk to me. All right. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. I'm me. And if that's the way they feel, then I don't really want a relationship with them anyway. So I'm just going to go be myself, and whatever happens, happens.
And isn't
it'll
it
be
so,
fun, and I'll relate to that. And then you do it, and guess what? You see, your problem's gone. You're not shy. You're not the wallflower anymore because you don't have the fear. You've pulled the teeth out of the. Accept the worst, and truly accept the worst. That if the worst happens, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. And it's just the way it is. You can live with it.
Isn't it incredibly paradoxical how, like, if you're talking about shyness, for example, a lot of times the people who are most liked are those who don't care about what anyone thinks about them. Mm-hmm. It's very paradoxical to me because it's like, it's funny, it reminds me of that old saying, the hungry don't get fed. The more you want people to like you, which means you're dependent on their reaction to you, the more shy you become because you're not willing to accept the worst. You only want their perfect reaction to you based on who you want them to think of you. It's a strange kind of paradox. And the people who don't really care what anyone thinks, who are okay with letting go, accepting the worst, and allowing people to think whatever they want to think about them, a lot of times they're the ones who have shyness, they're the ones who have more friends, they're the ones who are much more skillful, I guess you could call it, not skillful, but skillful when it comes to socializing, and they don't really have the shyness. Sure. Bizarre little paradox there.
Well, it's a fact of life that fear creates the situation it's afraid of. If you're fearful, you tend to create that very thing that you're afraid of. So if you're fearful that people won't like you or won't respond well to you, then you will act in such a way will cause people not to like you or not to respond to you. Yeah. You see? So if you're worried that your girlfriend will leave you, and then that makes you very clingy, then your girlfriend, you're pushing her away because of your fear. You see? So fear and the way part of the mechanics of consciousness, and that your intent modifies the probability of the future. Future probability is modified by intent. If your intent is very fearful, you're putting a lot of energy into that fearful thing happening. You're dwelling on those people not liking you. You're dwelling on your girlfriend leaving you. So you're putting all this, because you're fearful of it, you're putting all this energy into that happening, which raises the probability that indeed it will happen. You see? So if we're very fearful, we tend to produce situations that justify our fears, that make our fears come true. That's just the way it is. So if you're afraid, like say, if you're afraid that people won't like you, let's say you're afraid that people don't like you, so what do? You do one of two things. You become a bully, or you become a wallflower, you see, and neither one of those gathers many friends. So it's just the way it is. And there's this strategy that people use a lot. It's called, I can't lose if I don't play. And what that means is that if you're afraid of losing, then the best way to keep from losing is to stay out of the game, is to not give people an opportunity to not like you, you see, or not give your boss an opportunity to pass you over, whatever. So I can't lose if I don't play. But the truth is, if you don't play, you'll always lose, because not winning is losing, and you can't win if you don't play. Yeah. So you become a perpetual loser if you don't play. See, that's the problem. So we make that fear, we manifest what we're afraid of. So you have a parent that's afraid their children are going to get on drugs. So the parent is very controlling, you know, keeps their kids at home. They can't date, they can't drive cars, they can't go out. And what do? Well, one day they are going to get loose, right? One day they'll be old enough to walk out, and when they do, they'll be wild, they'll be crazy, they'll do everything that was denied them to do, and it'll be much, much worse. And why? Because you had a fear that it was going to be worse. And why, you know, so you create that situation.
It reminds me of the war on drugs. You know, the war on drugs, we've been trying to control drug use for 40 years, and now there's more drug use than ever before. You got icons who glorify drug use. I mean, there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Yeah, that's our culture. Our culture is a very drug-based culture. We don't. That's part of the fear. The reason that people take drugs is because the drugs help them escape their fear. You know, the fear isn't any longer eyeball to eyeball with them after they get inebriated. After they take a drug, it kind of pushes the fear away. That's why people leave the television sets running all the time, even though they're not watching them, just because that background noise helps them not really think about anything too deeply. It kind of keeps them suspended without having to actually face who they are and what they are. So they constantly have things going on around them, TVs running in the background, this or that, jabbering on the phone, you know, whatever it is, humma, just keep the action going. And that way we never actually have to sit and think, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? What's the value of my life? Because if they ever had to do that, it would scare them. It would be fearful. They'd go into denial. So they keep all that at bay just by staying busy, staying noisy, staying until they're exhausted. Then they pass out at sleep and wake up and start another day. One
of the scariest things in the world for people is silence. Mm-hmm. Something as simple as sitting quietly, people, they can't handle it. And then we have a society, so many people stimulated smartphone. I'm a victim of that. I'm constantly checking my smartphone. People have to be stimulating themselves in one way or another. And if ever they had to just went and just sit still, they would, all the inner demons they haven't addressed will come out freaking gnawing at them. So, and it's another paradox, because we tend to think that the people who are the most cutthroat going through life, absorbed in the modern pop culture, constantly obsessed with the celebrities, this, the new news feeds, this, clicking on their smartphone, checking Facebook, and we a lot of times we interpret that, the most the most competitive, most powerful, the most elite. And a lot of times they have so many deep underlying issues that in silence they would be forced to confront, but and they just keep running, and it's cowardice that it's a form of cowardice. It's a form of fear that for some reason society interprets as ballsiness, competitiveness, being the most committed. To me how that works out, and I just kind of lost my train there, but it's bizarre. Yeah,
it's just the way it's just the way people are. That's They pile on lots and lots of superficial stuff to ever, so that they can keep from ever having to deal with the depth of things.
What is true courage? What is true courage, Tom?
Well,
what is true courage?
Courage generally can be defined as having having what it takes, having the ability to face your fear. So you need courage because you have fear. If you don't have any fear, you really don't need courage in a sense, because you are courage. Courage is what you are.
Yeah.
You just do. You're not worried whether people like you or not. You're not worried about the outcome. You just do the best you can. You try to be as helpful, as giving, make good choices, and then you just let all the chips fall where they may. Well, that would sound like complete courage, right? Well, yeah. Courage is, you only need courage if you have fear. But if you have fear, then courage is what it takes, because it takes courage to accept the worst. You see, that's where courage comes in. When you tell people, all right, you've located your fear, you've identified it, now you're having trouble dealing with it, what do you have to do? Have courage. You have to have the courage to accept the worst. This is, the way it might be, or this is the way I might be. All right, I'll accept that. If that's me, then I'm going to go move out into life and be that way and see what happens. And what'll happen is that everything will get a lot better, and very quickly you won't be that way, and other people won't see you that way. And most fears are in the class called paper tigers. Yep. Not real tigers. They're not real things. They look like monsters with very sharp, long teeth, but you find out, somebody said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and it typically works out that way. It's a paper tiger. Once you accept it and move past it, it's not scary at all. Matter of fact, the whole fear thing just turns into smoke and disappears.
Shocking. It's like fear is, it seems like fear is a choice, right?
Sure. They're all choices. You can make a courageous choice. You can make a fearful choice. That's the whole point. When you're here in this virtual reality to make choices. And as you make choices, if those are, fearful choices, then you are not, growing up. You're not evolving the quality of your consciousness. You're kind of failing your lessons here. If you make choices that are love-based choices, then you are. And as you grow up, you find your life is just more and more pleasant. More and more, everything works, and everybody and you and your relationships just work out. If what you want to do is travel the world, well, you do it. If what you want to do is, have a lot of relationship and family and children and all, well, you do it. Things just happen the way you like them, because you're not trying to force the world to be the way you want it. You're accepting it as it is and then dealing with it with love. It's a real simple idea. It's a very simple philosophy, and it's also good science. But it's not necessarily simple to do, because these fears have a grip on us. Most of us probably let's say, typically a person makes 95% of all of their choices are fear-based. We don't realize it, but it's our fears and our beliefs that drive us, push us to do this and that. The way we react, the choices we make are because of our fear and our beliefs. And that's our driver. Well, that driver will never drive you to any place that's full of joy. That driver you'll always be on the run, so to speak. You'll never really find peace with that driver.
Yeah.
But that's the way we are, and it's not easy for people to, one, find their fear, and then two, to face it. People struggle with it. They're deep kind of things, and it just takes courage. There's no other antidote to fear other than courage to let that fear go and accept the worst. The worst almost never happens. If you just accept it, you'll find that worst almost never happens.
Yeah.
But if it does, you accept it and go on. It's okay.
Exactly.
Not a problem. But again, I warn you that you can't tell yourself it's okay. It can't be an intellectual process.
Yep.
If it's only on the intellect and you say, all right, I'm just going to go up and talk to that girl and, it's okay. She can be mean or this or that, and I won't mind. It's fine. And then she gets up there and brushes you off, and then you feel terrible.
Yeah.
See, that was just an intellectual thinking that you could deal with that fear.
There's
You
a
have to deal
difference.
with it at the being level. You have to deal with it,
Yes.
at your gut at a deep level, not just intellectually.
Yeah, there's a difference between just making the mental statement of I accept the worst and then actually really mind can be so deceptive. Like a lot of times
Mhm.
we think if I just think something that it's caused the internal change at the deep real level. But it's funny we let that fool us a lot of times. A lot of times, like oh, accept the worst. The difference between just mentally saying it, it's almost like the mind and the true like soul being are separate things. Is that kind of
That's because
accurate?
of that's because of the ego. What's going on is the intellect spends most of its time serving the ego. So when the intellect says, "Okay, I'm going to face my fear," and the ego says, "All right, that's fine. We got it. Let's go on." That ego makes you feel better. See, that ego helps you deal with that fear by
Yeah.
telling you, "Oh, everything's going to be all right. You got it. No problem." But if you don't really have it, if that's just your ego talking, you know that at a deeper level and you're still afraid. See, it hasn't helped you any. You haven't gotten anywhere. So you have to get you have to get rid of this fear, which means getting rid of this ego, and suddenly life not only is fun and pleasant, but it's very profitable. Everything works good for you.
Yeah. Cool. Um, yeah, just as we were just talking about that, I really felt an interesting thing. I felt like, it seems like my own life, I can go through life more conceptually, almost like I'm living through concepts as opposed to living through my actual being. Uh, it's
Hmm.
it's it's weird. It almost seems like that's just like a giant like procrastination mechanism that the ego
Hmm.
or the mind puts in place. Like I'll
Yeah.
just live through thoughts. I'll just conceptually think about facing this fear or doing that thing I had to do last week. Which I think that's kind of like what procrastination is a lot of. Like it's like a little game, a little mind game we play with ourselves. Like oh, I'll just do it in an hour, as if the task you had to complete would somehow be easier to do in an hour
Right.
than it is now. It's the same task. You just play mind games to
Right.
kind of buffer out the harshness, the facts of reality.
That mind game you're talking about, that's what the ego does. It does feel better. You see? So if you've got something to do and you really don't want to do it, how do you make yourself feel better? You make yourself feel better. It says, "Oh well, I'll do it, in a little while. I'll do it tomorrow," and that kind of stuff. Of course, tomorrow comes, you don't do it then either, because you really don't want to do it. But you feel better because you said that you're going to do it tomorrow. You see, that's the
Said it.
ego. That's the ego's job, and the intellect and ego work together to try to make you feel better
Wow.
and you not see and not feel your fear. And that's what moves us. That's what motivates us, and that's what drives our choices almost all the time. We do that always. So when you hear these philosophers, and so they say what you need to do is live in the moment. You
Yeah.
say what they're trying to tell you to do is live at the being level.
Mm.
Live it where you are. Let your ego and intellect go. Just be in the moment, so that when you have to make a choice, it's you at the being level making the choice. And that's kind of the point of that live in the moment, is to get out your intellect. So you're not thinking about what you're doing or why you should do it or what would look good, or what am I showing my good profile now, if I am I doing this so that so this will get me ahead. But you just interact in the moment without all that chatter going on. Well, it's kind of a trick to get people to fly underneath the ego by
Yeah.
suspending the intellectual manipulation and analysis of the time to
And
just be the being level.
it's funny because a lot of times people they'll even turn. I've done this before. They'll even turn, be in the moment. I've turned that into an intellectual concept where, okay, now I'm going to be in the moment, and it's just a concept, and it's not the real thing. But we get the same thing happens to me when I meditate. When I meditate, I spend like for example, there's different advice that people give. on how to meditate, but one advice I once heard on how to meditate effectively was concentrate on the feeling of your breath. But what's happened to me a lot of times is that I'll turn the actual being level process of focusing on the feeling of my breath, I'll turn that into a concept, and then I just spend 25 minutes sitting there thinking about feeling my breath and not actually feeling the breath. So I ended up just wasting my time sitting there, and that was a little gimmick I learned. I recently kind of noticed the distinction between thinking about feeling my breath and actually feeling the breath. There's a difference.
Sure. Yeah, one of them's intellectual, the other's at the being level.
Yeah.
And the reason that they ask you to be aware of your breath is because that's something that is so mundane and so uncontrolled. Your body just does it, that it relaxes your mind and stops the chain of analysis and judgment that's going on all the time. What they call monkey mind. Kind of quiets that monkey mind if you just think about this non-operative thing of breathing. It's not like you have to breathe. Your body just breathes, and if you're kind of with it, then that gives you something to occupy your mind with that's non-operative, if you will, that then allows you to quiet and gives you a meditation state. Same with a mantra. The reason that you say a mantra, because that just fills your mind, that sound of the mantra. And if your mind is filled with the sound of the mantra, it's not doing all the monkey chatter that's going on all the time in people's minds. It's like fluff. It's like a way of filling your head with non-operative fluff so that you can still all the chatter. That's the kind of the way these meditation techniques work. But if what you're doing, running a little side current of chatter all the time, okay, yeah, I'm breathing now. It goes in, it goes out. Yeah, okay, there. Yeah, I feel that. I can feel that air going in and out. Okay, I'm doing it. See, that's the monkey mind. That's your intellect that's constantly at work. Your meditation isn't succeeding. You're overcoming it with our intellect. Many of us, particularly those of us who are more left brain, live our lives through our intellect. We are hardly even associated with ourselves at the being level. We live our lives through the intellect. The intellect mostly is serving the ego, which is serving fear, and that's our whole life. That's how we interact with people. That's how we interact with our significant other. We interact with our children. We go about everything driven by this intellect, ego, fear combination, and we don't know of any other way. The only times that we actually get a sense of our being level is when our emotions wash over us. And our emotions that get our attention are probably 80% negative. It's upset. It's angry. It's things aren't the way you want them. It's mostly negative. Occasionally it's really happy and something is really nice. We get good emotions too. But those emotions almost always come from the being level. Now, when you lose your fear, if you get rid of your ego, get rid of your fear, get rid of those beliefs, now you don't have an intellectual level and a being level. Those two just to be a whole you level. And you, as a person, you no longer have a, subconsciousness. You don't have that part of you that you're not aware of anymore. You're aware of all of you. You're aware of everything. You're aware of where your intents are coming from, and you're whole. So you're like, your intellectual part is no longer serving fear. Your planning is no longer serving fear. And then you become a whole conscious being. You have no subconscious. You are real and genuine and authentic all the time in whatever you do. And everything comes out of your being level, and your intellect is part of that being. The being level can think, the being level can make choices. They're just not fear-based choices. Well, the being level can make fear-based choices too, and that's possible. But when you get rid of the fear and get rid of the beliefs, then you're a whole person. Not only that, you're generally very happy, very positive person. So the reason we have this subconscious mind that pushes and pulls us around and causes us to do all kinds of things, that's, you know, all buried. That's the stuff that we can't deal with because of the fear. It's the fear that creates that. It gets stuffed into that subconscious where we can't deal with it because we're afraid of it. We don't want to deal with it. We stick it where we can't get at it, where we don't deal with it. And then the ego tells us, well, that's all right. That's okay. We don't do that. We're fine. We're doing it right. We're meditating. We've let the fear go. We can accept it all, you know, and like tells us all that stuff. And then we go on until we actually realize that we really don't feel all that much happier. Our life really isn't full of joy and peace. And we seem to always be struggling. And then you realize you're really not doing as well as you think you're doing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like that.
So you say that the purpose of our lives, maybe I'm generalizing, I'm not sure, but the purpose of our existence is to evolve our consciousness. And you say that the purpose is to evolve our consciousness towards love. And as you mentioned earlier, the opposite of love is fear. So, you know, ever since I've heard that, you know, I read your book back in 2011, or most of the book, and I heard that, it was very inspiring to me because it was like, wow, I mean, why, it seems hard to have an excuse. Like, if ever you're in a moment where you have to face fears and you choose not to, it's very empowering, it's very encouraging to think that the purpose of our existence is to face fear. That, you know, if you choose to not face a fear, it's not just, you know, no big deal, but it's actually the very purpose of your existence is to face fears. I feel like that's a very encouraging notion. And this is a very deep question. I don't know if you have an answer for it, but why do you think it is that the nature of our reality is such that we're supposed to evolve our consciousness towards love? Like, do you know if there's a reason for that, or is it just the way the cosmic mechanism works? Like, why love? Why is fear so repulsive, and why do we have to move towards love?
Sure, there's a very logical scientific explanation of why move toward love and why fear is the problem. Most of this is probably in book 1 and book 2, but let me give a very short account of it. And for those of your readers who, when I say book 1 and book 2, you can find that for free on Google Books. Okay, so I want to say that.
Yeah, I'll put the link.
Anyway,
I'll put the link for the book in the description below, guys, so you can check it out. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, because otherwise it sounds like if I'm saying, "Oh, that's in the books," like I'm trying to sell books.
The book is free.
So I always want to say the books are free, you know, so I can reference the books because you don't have to buy them. Anyway,
God forbid you make $2.
Anyway, the way the science runs is that, you know, we live in a virtual reality. Bodies are like the avatars, and we are consciousness. We're the players. Now think of World of Warcraft or The Sims. The consciousness for the Sims character is you, right? You're the player. You've got the joystick, you've got the keyboard and the monitor, and the Sims body, if you will, of the Sims character is just information. It's just data displayed on a screen. Okay, you're the consciousness. Well, that's kind of the thing that we have going here too. Our bodies are just the avatar, just data, just information, simulation, and we are consciousness. We've got the monitor and the joystick and the keyboard, metaphorically. So we get to make choices, just like we do for our Sims character. We make choices for the Sims character. What's the Sims character going to do? They're going to get up or sit down, you know, turn left or turn right, go to work or stay home. All the choices that a Sims character has to make, or a World of Warcraft character has to make, are made by the consciousness. We have the same role. So consciousness is a system. We're part of a larger consciousness system, and as we're pieces of it, because this system is an evolving natural system. Okay, it's not a magical system. It's not an infinite system. It's a finite, real system. And the way and we call it an information system because consciousness is all about information, right? When you make choices with your Sims character, it's all about information. Information displayed on your screen, the information that you click on your keyboard or your mouse, or whatever, it's trading information back and forth is what makes things go. Well, it's the same here. And we sort of know that because our whole awareness is just information we take in through our senses. So everything we're aware of is just information, and our choices are also information. So in any case, so you have a system. It's an information system. It's a natural system, and it has two choices. It can evolve, or it can die. Now, if you have an information system, you evolve by creating content. You die by reverting to randomness. So if you're an information system and all your bits are random, you have no information. You're basically dead. You're no longer an information system. You're just an uncorrelated bunch of bits that don't mean anything. So that's death for an information system. So this information system called the larger consciousness system needs to evolve. It needs to create content. And it does that by lowering its entropy. Entropy is a scientific term that is a measure of disorder. Disorder means randomness. If all your bits are disordered, then they're random. You order those bits, then the order defines your content. So you see?
Yes.
And these are all very scientific, ideas. If you look up information and entropy and so on, you'll see these are kind of standard scientific ideas about information and entropy and content.
And so
in any case,
low entropy is more equatable with love, correct?
Right, and I'll explain why that's related. So you have this larger consciousness system. It's an information system. It survives by lowering its entropy, more content, less randomness. That's what it does. So if it's evolving, and again, this is just natural evolution, and it tries something, and if that doesn't work, that goes away and it tries something else. That's the way evolution works. So in order to lower its entropy, it has a lot more opportunities to do things, to interact, to lower its entropy. It has more opportunities to do that if it has more complexity, more ways it can build, more ways that it can create. So what it does is it divides itself into interactive pieces. Okay, now if we look at our biology, it did the same thing. You had one-cell creatures, and they found out the way that they could decrease their entropy was multi-celled creatures working together and so on. So this idea of divide creates more opportunities, more ways of putting things together that are helpful, that are useful, that create content. Then it gives you a wider path in which you can evolve than if you're just a monolithic thing. So now we logically have this larger consciousness system. It's interacting with itself, with pieces. The pieces of itself are all interacting with each other. All right, now, how do they optimize their interaction in order to lower entropy? Okay, how we have a social system. We have a bunch of communicating chunks of consciousness interacting with each other. That defines a social system. How does a social system optimize its content, optimize its value, if you will, lower its entropy, provide more structure? The way it does that is by love, by cooperation. If you have a lot of pieces and they cooperate, work together, there's much that they can build and create. If you have a bunch of pieces and they are very self-focused and self-centered, that means fearful, then what they can create as a group is very constrained, you see? And that's an easy thing to think about, and you can see that, I sometimes give a little analogy. If you had, 10,000 people and you put them in a particular set of resources, and these people were all fearful, which means each one's trying to grab as much as he can of what's available and then hold it, somehow keep it. And the way that would evolve then is that they would kind of come together and create little defense packs, right? So a bunch of them would group together so they'd be more defensible against others, and then others would group up and eventually the groups would have wars with each other, right? That's what you expect from a fear-based social system.
Yes.
Well, that's what we've got. That sounds like the world we live in, because we are mostly a fear-based, and ego-based individuals. But on the other hand, if you had that same bunch of people with the same resources, and they all were focused on how can I help, how can I add, what can I contribute to the whole, what are my skills and my interests and so on, how can I add to this? So that it was very cooperative. So if somebody got a good idea, instead of holding it to themselves so that they could make, make something for themselves with it and not let anybody else get it, they'd share it, because it's everybody's trying to work together. Now think what kind of society they would make. You see, it would be a very caring, supportive society. Anyone gets in trouble, everybody's there to help, etc. Okay, now which one has the lower entropy and which one has the high entropy? Well, it's obvious. The one can build lots of structure, lots of things, and basically optimizes its potential. Everybody works together, they optimize the potential of the whole. On a biological analogy, it's the same thing. You have the multi-celled things, which then created specialization of cells. So you had the locomotion part, the defense part, the control part, and they all together, and when they do that, they form something that's much bigger, more survivable, and lasting, much lower entropy than just the single-celled thing that was just by itself trying to look out for itself. So this works the same way. So that's why love is what I mean is by a caring, cooperative, it's about other. You see, so that defines love, and that's why these individuated units of consciousness are supposed to become love. In other words, lower their entropy, because they're part of the system. As they lower their entropy, the whole system lowers its entropy. And why does it want to lower its entropy? Because that survives. That's how it grows and moves forward. If it doesn't continually work at lowering its entropy, it will eventually raise its entropy. You see, without effort, if you don't put effort in, then entropy just tends to drift up. It doesn't, things come apart. You don't, you have to actively pull things together.
Yeah.
Cooperate takes people who want to cooperate to do that. If you don't put in the energy, you dissipate. So that's the deal, is that if you're fearful, which means self-focused, then you are working against the survivability of the thing you're a part of. You see, that doesn't sound too smart. You're actually part of the problem, not part of the solution. If you are trying to become love, which means decreasing your entropy, you're helping the whole system survive, and not only survive, but become more, grow, become some content and some kind of structure that's bigger and better than what it was before. So here we are, one of these, you and I are each one of these individuated units of consciousness, and here we are in this virtual reality game, which is provided to us by this larger consciousness system to give us a place where we can interact, where we can make choices, where we can kind of get out there and use this idea of choice for lowering entropy. And if we make good choices, and good is defined as a choice that lowers entropy, a choice that is moving us toward becoming love, then we are evolving the quality of our consciousness. We're growing up, we're doing the right thing. And if we are fearful, we are doing the opposite. We are the anchor, that won't let the boat move forward. We're going backwards. We are pulling the system toward dissolution and death. So that's why fear is not the good thing to do. It's pulling in the opposite direction for the whole being. For we the consciousness system, because we are part of that system. And when you are doing what you should do, why you're here, the point of your being here in this virtual reality is to use your free will to make choices that lowers your entropy, raises the quality of your consciousness.
Well, Tom, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate the conversation. Do you have anything you'd like to tell my audience about? I know you mentioned your book at the start. I don't know if you want to tell me about the book again, or I don't know if you have like a event or something like that.
Well, if the people who are listening to this have an interest and want to know more, then there's several places they can go. I would suggest that they first might take a tour of my YouTube site, and if they just Google Thomas Campbell or My Big Toe, either one of those, they'll get lots of links that'll take you to YouTube and other places. But the YouTube site, if they want to go directly, just do the www.youtube.com/ and then put in a TWCJR44.
Guys, I will have his YouTube channel linked right underneath Tom on the screen. A little link there on the screen. Click it, it'll take you right to the YouTube channel.
Right. So that's one place where there's a lot of information that's easier than reading books. If you just want to know something about the books, you can go to my website, and that's www.mybigtoe.com, and there's some things in there that'll tell you about the books so that you can read about them before you take the time to actually read them. They are on Google Books for free, or you can buy them from my website. Or you can buy them from Amazon, Barnes & Noble and that sort of stuff. They're in a lot of bookstores, so they're just around. You can find them if that's what you want. If you try hard, you can find black market copies that are all over the internet, where people have taken a book and made copies and sent them around, so you don't have to pay for it if you really don't want to. But anyway, so there's a lot of information. The book goes into more detail on the metaphysics and philosophy side. And the videos go into more detail on the science side, at least some of them do, and the physics side. Probably the one video that is the best all-around summary would be the Calgary workshop videos. And there's 3 of those. There's an intro, which you could skip if you're going to do the others. That's just like an hour and a half or something. And then that's Friday. Then Saturday is all day is theory. It's kind of why, what is this reality system? Why does it work that way? And sets up kind of the fundamental concepts we've been talking about. And then on Sunday, it's all about application, remote viewing, using your mind to heal. What's it like to explore the larger consciousness system? So it's all about those kinds of things, and what to expect and what not to expect and how to do it, and some exercises that you can use to gain proficiency in those kinds of things. So that's what you find in Sunday. So there's other sources besides that, but that's one of the better summaries. Is that
very cool? And you just released your book in audiobook format, correct?
Yeah, the books are out there in audio. That's true. Books.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Tom. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. Leave comments below. What do you guys think here? If you have any questions or concerns, if you have any issues in your life going through certain challenges that are holding you back, don't hesitate to comment below or send me a private message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Tom, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
You're welcome, Chris. It's
perfect, man. Keep in touch, bro.
Okay.
Later, man. See ya.
Bye.
For Neil, greatness began with a choice: the red pill or the blue pill.
Now you can make that choice too, because now I'm introducing the red pill. The red pill contains the singular, powerful ingredient, L-theanine. If you choose to take the red pill, then click the screen right here
to learn more.